we have a lot to do today, so we're going to get started as everybody comes into the room. Welcome to each and every one of you. There are attendees, as you can see from all over the country, representing dozens and dozens of grassroots organizations today. Welcome, welcome. We hope you are sharing that in the chat box. It looks like you are. Keep on coming. History has brought us together at this moment to protect, defend, and strengthen our democracy, our Constitution, our values, and vulnerable people in our communities, both in the country and in the world. That is who we are. We want to acknowledge today that most of us thought that most of us didn't think this is what we'd be doing at this stage in our life, even though no matter what stage you're in, but we're here. And we're here because of our love of country. We're here because of our love of our family. And we're here because of our love for friends and neighbors. So Molly and I want to make sure you know how proud we are to be in this fight with you. You inspire us each and every day to keep on going. And you inspire us each and every day to push back, to get louder, and to organize our response to this utter madness. I am Linda Carmen. I am the co-lead of Commit to Democracy, along with Molly Hermes. Molly, could you go back a slide? Thanks. In response, our organization was formed in response to Trump 1.0. We were formed in a family room of our co-founder, Jackie Moreau. And we've grown today to an organization over 16,000 strong nationwide. We also collaborate with dozens and dozens of other grassroots organizations to phone bank, text, postcard, take direct action, and have a very large social media amplification. We consider ourselves a one-stop shop. Our most important accomplishment, however, is our community. The community that we've created and nurtured. We believe that staying in community is the way we can accomplish more and that we can help one another through these trying times of despair and fear. So, next slide, please. I think we're too loud. Thanks. So we've created our community, and in that community, we have been able to accomplish great things. We have sent out over 1 million postcards. We have made 185,000 calls. We've knocked on 4,000 doors, and we sent over 43 million texts in 2024. And all the time in our community, we have had fun raising money and having in-person events together, just somewhat like what we're having today. So today, our plan is simple. We're ramping up our direct action to keep our voices heard. We are hosting action days 3 days a week to call senators and representatives, and we're continuing our programs to elect Democrats at every level in the state and federal level where we can. We are also urging our members to attend rallies, protests, and demonstrations across the entire country. So as I turn this session over to Molly, who is going to introduce our honored guests today, I want to point out that our chat is open now, but we will close it for the presentation of Heather and Simon. After they're done, we will open it again for the Q&A. I want to point out that our Q&A is going to be created through questions that were submitted to us to make it more efficient use of our time here together today. But if you put a question in the chat box during the Q&A, we will send it on to Heather and to Simon so that they can hear your voice. So with that, I turn the presentation over to Molly.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Molly Hermes. As Linda said, I'm the co-leader of Commit to Democracy, and it is my great pleasure to introduce both of our esteemed guests who will be in conversation with each other for the first time. First, Commit to Democracy has the honor and the privilege of hosting renowned historian and scholar Heather Cox Richardson. So many people across America know her for her nightly newsletter, Letters from an American, and her Facebook Lives. Many of us have also seen her beautiful pictures of her home state of Maine on the nights she does take off. So many of us rely on her framing current events within an historical context. She has published many books, including Democracy Awakening, Notes on the State of America, that can be found at your favorite bookstore. She is beloved by many. Second, it is an honor and a privilege to welcome back Simon Rosenberg to the Commit to Democracy community. Simon is a highly regarded political strategist and commentator with more than 30 years of experience in national politics and television news. He has built a home for his political analysis, commentary, and live political discussions at Hopium Chronicles, an engaging new project on the Substack media platform. So without further ado, let me welcome to the stage both Heather Cox Richardson and Simon Rosenberg.
Hello, everybody.
And hello, Simon. It's such a pleasure to be here with Commit to Democracy and to be here with you. I'm not sure we have talked together before.
It is amazing, Heather. I mean, I started my Substack really because of you and the inspiration that you gave to me and to so many. And so it's really an honor to be here with you today.
Well, so let's dig right into it. And first of all, thank everybody for being here, not least of whom is Nancy, I just saw go by, who was my sister's roommate in college. I did see that. And that's part of what's so much fun about this moment is so many people from so many different walks of life coming together to defend the country that we care so deeply about. But I'm really excited to talk to you because one of the things that I see as I look around right now is an awful lot of people who want to have skin in the game. They want to change the way the country is happening, but nobody yet is coming together around a message, a firm message that we can carry forward, or a series of actions that feel like they're making a difference. Now, I think they are making a difference, but you're a strategist.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what kind of narrative framing we should have, how we should push that narrative framing, how we should put sand in the gears, and crucially, how we can involve people who are not really paying attention.
Yeah, so a couple thoughts. Number one is that I think we got closer to where we need to be last night. I think the Democrats have been over these early days, and I think we all kind of acknowledge that we've sort of gotten out of the box here slowly, surprisingly. But you know, a lot of the focus has been on the economic conversation about prices, the Medicaid cuts, the tax plan that Donald Trump is pushing, the plutocratic tax plan that he's pushing, the tariffs and so on. And I think Democrats have been sort of really staying there and living in that place, which has been an important place, but a very narrow place. And it's the reason it's important is that Trump's numbers are coming down. They've come down in the 538 average by 9 points since January 20th, which is a really significant drop. You've seen warnings from Trump's own pollster that the general direction of their economic plans are going to do damage to them if they actually execute on them. And so the Democratic strategy so far has been, the way I describe it is that it's been sort of really strong inside of a conventional box, but we're not in a conventional moment. And I think that where we have struggled so far is to elevate up to sound like we are protectors, that the senators and House members are honoring their oath and are protecting the Constitution in a time where the Constitution is being challenged in an unprecedented way. And I think last night, Alyssa Slotkin moved us further down the playing field to getting us to the place that we need to be. She started with the economic conversation, but then number two and number three were about national security and about protecting our democracy. And at the very end, she made a call for people to go fight. And she even said, your calls that have been coming in have helped push us into doing more, right? She acknowledged the importance of the bottom-up grassroots movement that we're seeing. So I think that the way I've been talking about this, Heather, is we needed to open up a second front in addition to the economic conversation that gets into the urgency of the moment as Elon Musk and Donald Trump are waging this extraordinary attack against our government and what I call the America of the Four Freedoms. And that last night, I think we started for the first time a very aggressive and comfortable frame for where I think the Democrats are going to go in the House and the Senate, because we have to act with greater urgency. The damage that's being done to our country, in many cases, I think is going to be difficult, if not impossible, to repair. I think the Democrats, frankly, really have to challenge far more aggressively what Musk is doing in particular, and also now what Trump is doing abroad. And I think that, there are cracks appearing. I think what's really important to recognize, I'll make this point and we can go back to the strategy of what we do next, but we have to acknowledge there are cracks appearing in this coalition. They're not significant, they're small, but you're seeing a lot of Republicans break from Trump rhetorically on Russia. This is a hard thing. It's why Slotkin talked about Reagan last night, is that I think for a lot of Republicans, this embrace of Putin is a bridge too far for the traditional party of Reagan. And you're seeing now rhetorically the place of greatest um, break from Trump rhetorically. There has been very little action taken by Republicans, has been on his embrace of Putin. The second area is that there's clear concerns about the plutocratic budget and the cuts to Medicaid. They have been publicly expressed again and again, warnings from members saying that if the cuts are too big, they can't necessarily support Trump's bill. And the third area has been in Musk's savage attack on the government and the dissembly of the United States government. And today, Musk is meeting. He met earlier. I didn't see any news reports with the Senate Republicans. He's meeting with the House Republicans tonight, because they're hearing it in these town hall meetings. Everybody, they're feeling the heat, and they know that this stuff is going to do damage to their communities. They're going to lose jobs in their communities. They're going to lose services and programs. And Republicans are obviously now starting to voice in a more aggressive way concerns about the way Musk is operating. So there are cracks. And Heather, what we talk about in our community is little cracks can become big cracks if we keep the pressure on and take advantage of these opportunities that we have. But let me just say one last point, is that there's no question that I think all of us wish we were further along than we are right now in building this ferocious opposition that we need. And what I have been advocating to Senator Schumer and to Leader Jeffries, both publicly and also in private meetings, is for them to recognize they have a whole army ready to go to work for them. They have 6 million people who gave to the campaign in 2024 and volunteered. We have this whole new pro-democracy media that's growing up around the country. We've got tens of thousands of Democratic elected officials that are ready to go to work to fight Trump. We have all of our traditional party apparatus and our traditional allies. All of this is sitting there waiting for our leaders in Washington to go build this new ferocious opposition that we need. And we need to, what we've been doing, and what I'm really proud of all of you, is that you haven't been waiting for permission. You guys have been going out, doing the work, demanding of your leaders that they raise their game and fight at a higher level. And I think you've seen I would argue that in the last week, the House Democrats have gotten that message. They are moving much more aggressively. Jamie Raskin filed an amicus brief. It was a small little bit, but it was important. And they're moving, but we have to keep the pressure on our leaders, because part of our job, I think, Heather, is to help explain to our politicians what's expected of them now. And because their jobs have changed. They used to be legislators and executives, and now they need to be communicators and amplifiers and influencers and leaders of this new ferocious opposition that we have to build together. So I think that all of you have already done extraordinary work, but we know the biggest job is still ahead of us.
Well, so I'm going to push back a little bit on that, in the sense
Yeah.
that it's very clear to me that the 23 attorneys general, for example, the Democratic
Yeah.
states, they had a plan for more than a year before Trump's election to push back against the pieces of Project 2025, for example, or the things that Trump had threatened to do. And there's also, in fairness, Jamie Raskin and Adam Schiff have been talking in terms of protecting the United States since the first impeachment of Donald Trump in 2019, 2020. So those things have been out there. But what I see, and what I also feel, and I think I'm going to take that somewhere, is a real frustration on the part of people who have been doing the pro-democracy work, who feel like, you've just listed a whole bunch of different things that are all problematic, which is, obvious. but it's very hard to get your teeth into those when there's so much going on, when Musk is running around with seemingly completely illegally, and everybody simply lets him do it.
Yeah.
They're stripping through the private information from our government in the computers. And one of the things that jumps out to me in this moment is everyone keeps saying, as you just did, our leaders have to take the bit in their teeth. And actually, in other periods in our history that have been similar to this, not as bad, it's the complaints of the people that have raised a certain new leader, a new kind of leader. We create them, and we create them through the way we talk. And one of the things that I'm really hoping to sort of help work through today with you is, what does that story sound like? Reagan rose to power with the idea of the individual against the empire, which is, of course, a mythical idea that was encapsulated in 1977 with Star Wars. What is our narrative? I have ideas about this, but what do we say to people who are like, well, I don't really understand what Musk is doing, and I'm behind my president. I don't like everything, but I like some of it. Or, I don't want to have, I can't resist putting this in here, transgender mice in my home. That was a misunderstanding that Trump put forward last night. That was not true.
Yeah.
How do we create that narrative? And then once we have it, we're all doing all this sort of independent stuff, but how do we put a marker down that we are a movement?
Heather, you're asking me the easy questions today. I appreciate that.
College professor, what can I
I
say?
know, I know. Thank you. Listen, I think two things. I agree with everything you said, and I think what's really important, part of where I've gotten just in my own head here in the last few weeks, and things I've been saying that I'm not sure I totally believe, but I'm going to say it now, is that it's possible that this movement now that is leaderless is actually a blessing for us over time. And you were sort of alluding to this in the way that you described this. And I just didn't know this, because I think that as people go do the work and doing it on their own and doing it in their own communities and taking responsibility for stepping up at a time of enormous crisis for the country, they're going to have greater ownership of what we build together. And I think that I've now come to believe that the sort of bottom up way this is all happening is actually going to make this more sustainable and effective over time, which, as you pointed out, is sort of how this has happened before in our history. And I think that what I tell people all the time is, stop worrying about what Schumer should be doing and Jeffrey should be doing, and focus on what you can do. And I do think, Heather, in one immediate thing that I have called on, that I want to just encourage everybody to think about, is this, and I'm borrowing heavily from you because I knew we were going to be together, but I've called it that the Democrats in the House and Senate need to write a letter to America or to the world about, building off the Declaration of Independence, have the abuses and the usurpations, detailed, that they lay out in clear, plain language in 2 to 3 pages, why they think what Musk and Trump are doing is illegal, unconstitutional, and wrong. The absence of that document at this point is a little bit stunning to me. And I think that we have to continue to ask our leaders when we make our calls and we have our town hall meetings and everything else, for the House and Senate Democrats, for half the Congress, whose authorities are being trampled or usurped, they need to go on the record to explain why they believe that their authorities are being usurped by Trump and Musk. And I go back to this concept of the absence of it becomes more stunning than the presence of it, the lack of presence of it, right? This is obviously something that Raskin has begun, right? By the amicus brief that he filed last Friday on behalf of the House Democrats, which, by the way, everyone should notice the Senate Democrats did not join the House Democrats in filing an amicus brief. How hard would that have been for them to have done that together? And so I do think that we need to continue to demand more out of our leaders to be more aggressive, because, again, this isn't about 2026. The stuff that's being ripped apart now and dissembled now are going to be very, very hard to put back together. And the damage is being done, and we have to create greater urgency. I think in terms of the messaging piece, as I said, I think that we got closer last night with Alyssa Slotkin. And I think that for me, the way that we have to be grounded is in patriotism and love of country, that we have to become the Americans with the flag, fighting for this thing that has been here for 250 years, and to view them as the ones that are trampling it all. I don't know, as I said, I think that, I believe that patriotism and love of country, which we saw more powerfully expressed during the Democratic Convention than in any time since I've been a Democrat, going all the way back to the early 90s since I've been an active Democrat in the party. I think this is going to be the sentiment, Heather, that over time that we're going to forge into something really powerful. We need to be the protectors of this great American experiment. We need to realize that people all around the world are looking to us right now to preserve this champion of freedom, this unprecedented champion of freedom. I think we're still aiming too low in the way that we're talking to the people and to the people of the world about the gravity of what's happening here and what it will mean for the world, that if the American light, goes dark, what it's going to mean for freedom-loving people all around the world. It will be a tragedy of unimaginable proportions. And I think it's part of our job to continue to help push our electeds to go higher, to elevate up, right? To sort of understand that history is calling them at a critical moment. But it's your point that is the most important, is that it may not be Schumer and Jeffries. It may be other leaders are emerging. We don't know. We're already seeing this with Chris Murphy and Jasmine Crockett and AOC and others, Jamie Raskin, who's been an extraordinary leader, both in terms of his rhetorical leadership, but also in terms of the work he's doing right now, right? In translating this into actual legal action. But I think it's going to be something that comes out of patriotism, love of country, American flag, and reclaiming, the whole story of the Declaration of Independence and why we fought a mad king 250 years ago, and we're now being called to do it again.
So, first of all, I have talked about a new Declaration of Independence because that was, of course, so effective in 1776. But the person I want to have do it is a rap artist. That if you think about the role of language, it's the rap artists who could do that right now. And so if anybody out there knows a good rapper, I'd do it myself if I could do that, but I think that that would be fabulous. So I agree with you, but I'm still looking. I realized recently that I'm sort of a practical leaner, so I'm still looking for real practical ways to bring these things together, because there's, as you say, this army of people who want to reclaim democracy and feel like they need to get behind something. And of course, for me, that's always rhetoric and behind an idea of America. And I would like to pick up something you just said there about how the Democrats need to reclaim the concept of protecting America and American patriotism. And I would mean that this is a small d, not a big D necessarily, because in fact, the current people in charge of the United States government are not American. They are extremist radicals that are not part of the American tradition, except to the degree they line up with neo-Nazis and the elite enslavers during the 1850s, which are not normally moments that Americans are proud of. So one of the things that Americans have always done very well, and that really has been the heart of who we are, is community, is looking out for each other. And if you think, for example, about the American West, although the modern day image of the American West, really beginning with Goldwater, is of the American cowboy, in fact, that was a very brief moment of history and not terribly successful. The successful moments in the American West were ones of kinship and ones of community, helping each other, put up your barns after barns burned, because they always burned, that sort of community. And the reason that I look at that is one of the things I've been doing is going back through history and looking at the moments when America, in fact, managed to overcome the rise of a radical right. And in those moments, what people like Abraham Lincoln emphasized in the 1850s, and certainly what FDR emphasized, and Teddy Roosevelt at the turn of the last century, and then FDR emphasized in the 1930s and the 1940s, was this idea that we do not want to lose our country to an oligarchy or to a dictator, and that we have to reinforce that we are inclusive, that we believe in equality before the law, we believe in the idea of having a right to a say in your government, and we believe in equal access to resources. So one of the places I have looked is for the language that America, and especially the American government, really put forward in the the late 1930s while they were trying to rally people to stand against Hitler. And I think that that would be a very helpful thing for us to do. Now, one of the things, though, that worries me in this, and I do think that our language matters. I do think that those of us on this call and those of us working in this space can do this ourselves. What is deeply concerning to me is the fact that it certainly appears as if we are losing our right to have a say in our government. And you and I both know that doesn't go in a good direction for anybody if that happens. And I wonder if that's something that we need to forefront rather than say, we'll deal with it after we get rid of Musk.
Well, Heather, I want to just go back to something you said about the late 1930s and early 1940s. You know, I have a whole presentation that I do that goes through the history of the four freedoms. And you know, in the Hopium community, the four freedoms and the speech from 1941 is this sort of foundational thing about the modern world, that these four freedoms that FDR articulated, really the entire modern world is built on top of. And what Trump and Musk and Putin are attacking right now are the what I call the America of the four freedoms, right? Which is this rules-based order abroad and democracy here at home. And I've been very moved in the last few years about how powerful FDR's language was at a moment where he was trying to rally the country against authoritarianism and far-right fascism, and how he created this incredibly important understanding of freedom versus what I call dominion, right? And this idea that there is a politics of dominion and control and a politics of freedom. And that what I was proud of at the Democratic Convention is that I really feel like we lived in that place for 4 days, right? In a way that I don't know that the Democratic Party had really lived in a very long time. And we're going to have to reclaim this. I mean, I think that you and I are sort of on parallel. You know much more about this than I do and know the history of the country better. But I do think that FDR has given us, it's important to recognize what the assault is by Trump and Musk and Putin is on the post-World War II order that we imagined and built and fought and died for, that created an unprecedented era of opportunity for the people of the world. I mean, this has been a golden age in human history that is now, you know, on the verge of being, destroyed by what's happening here. So the stakes, I think, and this is why our leaders need to recognize that, you know, the people I have gotten in, probably like you, the number of Europeans and my British friends who've reached out to me in the last few weeks being like, what are you guys doing? I mean, it doesn't feel like you're really fighting hard enough. Do you understand the stakes for us in our countries, for what's happening in your country, and the need for you guys to leave it all on the playing field as America's done before? I mean, I think I increasingly believe, and I think Slotkin opened a door last night to and I thought she was very effective in my view. I thought that was a remarkably good speech, given, frankly, where we have been rhetorically over the last few weeks. And hopefully it's going to open up a floodgate for our proud patriotic leaders to really start articulating the kind of, you know, stuff that you're talking about. Remember also about community. Governor Walz spent so much time talking about community during the election and during the convention. It was an interesting, again, a rhetorical evolution for the Democratic Party during that time, that we look out for one another, that we're in community together. That was sort of new language for us. There was power to that, I think, to your point. So I think that, look, I think what I tell people at Hopium is that this is going to be a long and hard fight, and we're going to have good days and we're going to have bad days, and that we need to focus on turning little wins into big wins. And that, because I think that Trump is so oriented around winning and losing and strength and weakness in the way that he sees the world. And let me just spend 1 minute talking about this, because I think this has been a recent development in the last couple of days. Trump is clearly freaked about the protests. And it goes back to this whole thing about him, about his polling numbers, about crowd size, about protests, right? This stuff gets under his skin. And he is now repeatedly bringing up the protest, threatening protesters. He's lying about his poll numbers and the size of his election victory. His declining poll numbers are a big deal. Because it speaks to his strongman impulses. The crowds that are showing up are a big deal, because it's crowds that he couldn't generate himself, even at his own inaugural address, his inauguration in January. And so I think that we're heading in the right direction here, Heather. But we all know that it needs to happen faster, bigger, stronger. And I think that we also recognize now that it's getting warm out in the United States, and people are going to start going out much more and doing far more in-person kind of protests. And I think that who's going to lead that, how that's all going to emerge, and how we do it successfully and don't make big mistakes, which you can do in the kind of in-person protests, is something that our political leaders in Washington need, in my view, to start making some decisions about how they're going to direct this army instead of letting the army direct them. And that it's time now for them to start engaging with our communities all across the country in a far more direct way. I'll say one last thing. Tonight at 9 o'clock, Ken Martin, the DNC chairman, and Hakeem Jeffries are doing an open discussion with Democratic volunteers around the country. Everyone who wants to engage directly with them, they're going to be speaking to people in an organized way. This is, again, a good sign that the establishment party is starting to engage more directly with all of us to channel this energy into constructive ways. But we have a lot of work to do.
So I have a question on that. One of the things that really has jumped out with the protests is that the Republicans are ceasing to hold town halls because
Yeah.
of the way they've turned out. And that was also already interesting because those were not Republicans in purple districts who didn't hold town halls because they knew they wouldn't go well. Those were in deep red areas and they still didn't go well. And they generated viral moments that of course the Republicans now want to stop from happening. So they're not going to do town halls anymore. And there have been a number of suggestions that the Democrats, including losing candidates who lost in the last election, should hold their own town halls
Yeah.
instead. What do you think about that?
I think it's important. I think, one of the things we've been doing at Hopium is the 17 most vulnerable House members. We have been asking people to organize to push them on the budget vote that they were taking. Yeah, I think we're entering a phase now where far more creative things are going to start happening. I feel like we've gotten out of the shock and awe and we've gotten off our back, and Hakeem Jeffries is showing more confidence every day in how to navigate his unruly caucus. But I do think, yeah, going into these 17 or now the Democratic Party, by the way, Heather, just yesterday, the Democratic, one of the super PACs of the House, launched ads in 23 vulnerable House Republican districts attacking them for the plutocratic tax cuts and the Medicaid cuts. So they're now spending money on ads, right? They're going in and starting to soften up in these places. What I have said to both Schumer's people and to Jeffries' people and to Ken Martin's team, and I'm a fan of Ken Martin's, and I think he's going to be a very, very competent and strong chair for us because he understands how to run a party, which is the most important thing. We have 40 great spokespeople for the Democratic Party. He just needs to run this huge ship that he's running. Is that, we have lists of Democrats in all of these districts. We have donor lists, we have voter files, right? If Chuck Schumer wants to have protests against Republican senators back in their states, well, it's not that hard to do. We actually know who all the people are that we would call. And the party needs to rethink this. And I have been very aggressive behind the scenes, publicly, but also behind the scenes, about trying to create a process where the DNC and the House and Senate Democrats start speaking to the Democrats in these red places to get them to speak up at House meetings, at senators, and to make their voices heard. Because what is happening, you're exactly right. Those town halls in these deep red areas, there are Republicans there, but there are a lot of Democrats there. There are a lot of Democrats everywhere, right? And the thing is, when you call or you show up, they don't know if you're a Democrat or Republican, right? They just know that they're people. And this is why I think, if I could say one thing about where we are right now, Trump is weaker than he appears, and we are stronger. I think we have far more power than we actually understand. We just have to organize ourselves differently than we normally organize around elections. We have to now organize around being information warriors and playing in the information space in a way that they've often done for a very long time, but doing it in our way, consistent with our values. And it's why I love the fact that the way this is manifested early has been these, us showing up in a very small d Democratic way at town hall meetings and teletown halls and everything else, calling into the offices. I mean, Slotkin talked last night about how the calls and the contacts have moved them and made a difference in the way that they've approached everything. It's been really affirming to me to see this explosion of small d Democratic activism. My community every day, we have 4 things we shoot to do together every day. And tens of thousands of people in the Hopium community have been contacting their elected representatives, showing up at these town halls, doing the teletown halls. I've been so proud of the American people that, who have, in a time of crisis, have, I think, really taken the mantle here of small d democracy through these kinds of small actions. But we obviously have to have it happen at a much bigger scale. And I hope, Heather, that I can report back if we come back at some other talk a month from now, that we're seeing the House, Senate, and Democrats, along with the DNC, having a more direct campaign to speak to the Democrats in red areas and asking them to take the lead on this. At Hopium, I have a special little thing I say every day, which is for those of you who are Hopium members in these red districts, in these red states, your work is actually really vital, and don't feel like you don't have a voice, even if you live in Texas or in Kansas or other places. In some ways, your work is more important than the work that's being done in the more traditionally Democratic areas.
And it does seem important in this moment that there's a real rift between the Steve Bannon wing of the party, of the MAGA party, that is focused on populism and really hates the sorts of things that Musk is doing and hates the tax cuts, versus the tech bros who are now currently running the government. Because a lot of the MAGA people I know anyway vote MAGA because they have come to believe the Republican rhetoric that says that the Democrats are working for the rich. And here's a very clear example of the fact that that's exactly backward.